I genuinely didn't realize Pokemon cards have become this serious.
None for the kids, huh, bro?
Once again, every single time I see this guy at the machine is getting cleared out.
I thought Pokemon cards were harmless fun. Why are adults now fighting over them? When I was a kid, Pokemon cards were just something that you trade in the playground with your friends and family members. You'd get excited if you pulled something, shiny, and argued with your friend about whether the Charizard was worth 2 Blastoise. It was fun. It was a hobby. That was the extent of it. Imagine my confusion when I started seeing videos of fully grown adults arguing in supermarkets, queuing up for hours before stores opens, camping, Pokemon vending machines like a Snorlax, and in some cases even fighting over boxes of these Pokemon cards. Literally hand on hand combat. Everyone seems to be talking about these scalpers as well, which made me immediately ask, wait, whoa. What did I miss and what just happened? How did we get from a nostalgic children's card game to what looks suspiciously like a miniature stock market? For most people, Pokemon wasn't an investment. It was about collecting your favorite Pokemon and occasionally convincing your friend that your cards were better, or spending weeks trying to convince them to trade. The value wasn't necessarily monetary, the value came from the memories, the nostalgia. It was fun to open packs and build cool collections to show off to your friends and family, admiring that card that you just pulled. It was wholesome, which is why the current situation to me just feels so strange. It's just flipped on its back, because somewhere along the line these little pieces of cardboard stopped being just cards and started becoming assets. And as we all know, when assets become involved, so do the investors. What actually happened, because Pokemon cards didn't suddenly just become valuable overnight. For years they were mostly just collectibles. Sure, some rare cards were worth a little bit of money, but most people weren't treating them like retirement fund. They were not treating their childhood binders like retirement funds. They just weren't. Somewhere along the way, Pokemon cards stopped being treated like cards. They became something closer to modern relics, not just because of their value, but because of the nostalgia attached to them. People aren't just buying cardboard, they're buying a piece of their childhood in a sense. And once grading companies started to score, preserve, and seal cards away, an entire market formed around them. And this has been happening in the background for years and years. But then social media came along, and it didn't just change the hobby, it made the entire system around it visible. The grading, the flipping, the reselling, all happening in real time. Then a few things happen all at once, in my opinion. First comes the rise of social media, of course, and YouTube mainly. Opening Pokemon packs became a thing. It stopped becoming something that you did, in your own bedroom. It became content. Entire channels were built opening packs, chasing rare cards, and showing off massive collections. People started to hear stories about old cards selling for thousands, then tens of thousands, and in some cases even more. Suddenly Pokemon wasn't just a hobby anymore, it became an investment. And when people hear that something can make money, they tend to look at it very, very differently. But the real explosion, in my opinion, came during the pandemic. Before that, the card system was operating in the background. It wasn't something that an average person and average people spoke about. It was a lot more niche. Nostalgia was booming as we reminiscent of the good old times. Collectibles of all kinds started taking off again, and sports cards, comics, retro games. Let's also not forget about Pokemon Go. Definitely brought a lot of attention back onto Pokemon. Pokemon cards all saw huge interest. At the same time, of course, YouTube was a lot more present. Celebrities were popping off, and people like Logan Paul, for example, started to bring even more attention to Pokemon and the cards, with him famously buying, a very, very expensive Pikachu card, and also, of course, infamously being scammed as well along the way, and doing some scamming himself, allegedly. People who hadn't thought about Pokemon cards in years were suddenly asking, wait, my old cards might be worth something. And of course, as I mentioned prior, as soon as money enters the picture, everything changed. Pokemon cards stopped being just a game, because now, there were three people basically competing over the same product: the collectors who genuinely enjoyed and loved the hobby, and the resellers who saw an opportunity to make quick profit.
Last month we ran into this scalper, and guess what? We ran into him again. Watch to see what happens this week.
And of course, there's the investors who saw the long-term values. But in my opinion, I'm seeing a lot of fighting currently happening between the collectors and the resellers, which brings me to the group that everyone seems to hate: the scalpers, which is surprising to me. It is not slang for a bald person, which, that's what it sounds like. Firstly, I want to just make note that this is not exclusive to Pokemon cards. Shoes, hats, merch, literally anything that could be of value with limited stock and high demand is up for grabs. If you're spend any time around Pokemon collecting communities, or you're part of the chronically online, you'll know scalpers are looked as a literal scam. You'll see the same complaints: empty scalps, empty shelves, products selling out within minutes, people buying entire trolleys full of stock. And in general, there's a bit of an understanding the scalpers got there first.
Picture dropped and people were wondering how'd they get this much amount of product when there's a limit per person. And there's a rumor that these guys bought 100+ memberships to Sam's Club, bro.
In simple terms, a scalper is someone who buys a product they believe will be in high demand and then resells it for more money. They're called scalpers particularly because they buy huge amounts of stocks. I mean, as much as they can grab, they will grab. Their goal usually isn't to collect the cards as a fun hobby necessarily. It isn't to build a deck, or a collection. The primary goal is the profit. They're looking at Pokemon cards the same way somebody else might be looking at concert tickets, trainers, or limited edition product. If they can buy it for 50 and sell it for 100, that's the opportunity that they're looking for and chasing. Essentially, they want to flip sealed products. So as I mentioned, buy for 50, sell for 100. They want to exploit shortages, or even sometimes create those shortages themselves. Buy everything before others can, upcharge later. To them, the faster they can get the product, the better chance they have of reselling it while the hype is at its highest. It boils down to they're trying to secure stock before anyone else can, because in a market where high demand is higher than supply, being first matters. So while they're thinking money here, money there, profit, I'm gonna make a bag, the collectors are literally stood there like, hello, like, this kid behind you wanted those. Like, they don't care. Okay, most collectors as well, they don't really care about the money. It's more about the nostalgia, the appearance of the card, how good the card is. That's probably about it. Not necessarily let's make money out of it. One thing to note as well, there is definitely a bit of an overlap. You've got the collectors who genuinely love the hobbies, you've got the investors who see the cards as assets, you've got the resellers who buy and sell cards for profit, and then you've got the scalpers, which, as we know, buy very large amounts of stock specifically to create scarcity and flip it immediately. The problem is that some of these groups can overlap quite a bit. A collector might sell cards, a reseller might genuinely enjoy Pokemon, someone can start as a hobbyist and then end up treating it like a business. So it's not necessarily always a good guy versus bad guy. But I think what people hate isn't necessarily the reselling itself, which can also be annoying. It's when somebody clears out an entire shelf, making it harder for everyone else to participate in the hobby purely because they see a money sign. Don't chew me up in these comments, okay? But here's the interesting thing, scalpers don't entirely create demand. They kind of respond to it. If nobody wanted Pokemon cards, scalpers wouldn't be interested. They're only there because, enough people are willing to pay above retail prices. In strange ways, scalpers are almost a symptom of the hobby's popularity rather than the cause of it. Not to say, that they don't amplify the scarcity by buying up all the flipping stock, and of course that doesn't make the collectors feel any better, because from a collector's perspective, scalpers aren't just buying products, they're standing between fans and something that they genuinely enjoy. Just wanted to highlight that because there's a bit of a nuance to it. Imagine showing up to buy a new Pokemon card set only to discover someone has cleared the entire shelf with the intention of reselling it back to you double the price. It's easy to see why that creates frustration, because what was accessible to everyone is now becoming less and less accessible.
As you can see, Sam's Club messed up big time with these new 151 bundles. There was no limits at 90% of the stores, and people were picking up full displays, pallets, and just checking them out. You can even see this person loaded up their entire beat up Dodge Charger full of these bundles. Stores like Target have put limits for 2 to customer, but Sam's Club just absolutely dropped the ball on this. And instances like this actually lead companies to not even want to carry certain product because of the whole commotion and fights and everything like that. And with the rise of Pokemon that's continuing to go up, we're going to see a lot more altercations and just outright craziness like this, all for a freaking bundle.
And when you combine nostalgia, scarcity, money, passionate fans, emotions, that can, run emotions surprisingly high, which is probably why we ended up in such a situation where people are literally fighting each other online and in real life. Some stores have even resorted to limiting purchases to stop people from bulk buying for resale. Pokemon vending machines have become extremely popular in the US, for example. I am yet to see any in the UK. Let me know if you've seen any in the UK. But these vending machines have definitely become war zones in some cases. It created a subcategory of scalpers which will trigger these machines and glitch them to essentially get more cards. They will camp machines, which is honestly, I don't know if you can get lower than that. People have now started fighting back against these bulk buys essentially.
So what are you doing, man? I was here first.
So,
Yeah, I'm just waiting on the timer, bro.
what does that matter? None for the kids, huh, bro?
I handed out some.
Oh, yeah?
We got starting at the upper left corner. Is 20.
Walmart pay Phelan, huh?
Here we go again. Cleaning out the machine once again. Every single time I see this guy at the machine is getting cleared out. He doesn't care if it's singles, bundles, ETBs. He's just clearing everything out.
Shoot. What was that?
I was just standing here.
So loitering is not permitted. So you're not like meant to wait here, I think. Good luck though, buddy.
To scalpers, it's inventory. To a collector or a fan of Pokemon, it's a hobby. And those two groups often want the exact same product for completely different reasons. This is where we are seeing a lot of these videos coming out. Mind you, sometimes I can imagine scalpers fight amongst themselves. Of course, they're less likely to film it and post it on the web because what they're doing obviously is very much frowned upon. Honestly, the most surprising part of this for me is just how much things have changed. Okay, what used to be a fun activity you just enjoy as a kid has turned into something completely different now, and actually took a bit of a dark turn. And I don't even think it's as simple as saying, oh, it's this person's fault or it's that person's fault. It's a lot more complicated than that. But at the same time, it does feel like somewhere along the way a bit of common sense kind of got lost and greed has taken over, because I don't really need to buy all the boxes in the stores. You don't need to do that, okay? You don't need to clear every shelf, and you don't need to camp vending machines. You just don't need to do that. And that's just my opinion on it, really. but at the same time, in this economy, I just can't say I'm very surprised. It's a bit unfortunate, and I do think that this is only going to continue getting worse. That's my theory, so I guess we're gonna find out. Let me know what you think in the comments. Do you think I'm right? Do you think I'm wrong? Leave in the comments down below, and I will see you on the next video. Peace out.